Welcome back to another edition of the Pagcast. I'm your host, Michael Pagani, joined alongside Brandon Wheat King's play-by-play, Branden Crowe. Brandon, welcome to the Pagcast. Thank you again for coming on.
Yeah, no problem. Hopefully I've got decent service here. I'm out at the cabin, and I know it's not the greatest service, but I got the cell phone booster in the house here, and hopefully you guys can hear me.
Well, I can hear you quite fine, so we are good to go from that aspect. My first question to you today is that, a lot of people have turned on Netflix during this quarantine. What have you been doing? What have you kept yourself up to?
Well, I'd be lying if I said I didn't watch quite a few hours of Netflix. I definitely binged the Tiger King series, which was just pure insanity. We rewatched, what did we watch? We rewatched Breaking Bad, all sorts of goodies, but luckily it's summertime. I live out in the country on a small kind of little parcel of land. We got some animals and a few hours a day of different yard work and stuff. So luckily I've been pretty lucky to be outside for most of it and not cooped up, in a small apartment or anything like that. So it's been good.
That Tiger King series was, I think, the definition of what a roller coaster is. I mean, my God.
Yeah, I would agree that. I mean, I couldn't stop because I felt like it just hooked you in. Part of it, who knows what's believable, what isn't, what was truthful, what was made up, but still it made for good TV anyway.
Yeah, that's for sure. And it hooked a lot of viewers. And, I think another show that hooked a lot of viewers was The Last Dance because of Michael Jordan, because it definitely took a lot of us, the viewers, on what goes on behind the scenes during an NBA season.
Yeah, and I'm a sports fan, but I'm not a huge basketball fan.
Yeah,
I
same.
certainly jumped on board when the Raptors went on their run here last year, but I'm not a huge basketball fan. Like, I don't necessarily follow it closely, regularly, whatever's on SportsCenter in the morning, but the Last Dance, that was just unbelievable. I remember, obviously growing up in that era, I remember it being a big thing, but I don't remember it, as intensely as this helped me relive. So like most people my age, it was really cool to see, and all the vintage footage and the behind the scenes stuff from a sports perspective it was unreal. And I heard that they're working on one with Tiger Woods as a subject and another one with Lance Armstrong as a subject. So if that is the case, they got me hooked for a couple more series for sure.
Well, I think they should definitely use this as a plateau level for what the expectation is expected out of, like you mentioned, Lance Armstrong or a Tiger Woods.
Oh, yeah. I think the success they had with it, like I remember just before COVID kind of hit and took over and everybody was working from home, I had heard, I think it was on the Jay and Dan podcast, that ESPN and Netflix was doing The Last Dance, and they were going to be apparently originally it was just to be viewed on ESPN, but when people in Canada caught wind of it, most people in Canada, unless you have a pretty big cable package, don't have ESPN. So then they took to social media and said, like, how can we see this? Netflix teamed up, jumped on board, brought it to us Canadians kind of a week after it aired on ESPN in the States, and it turned into a really big hit. So I think they're onto something.
And have you been watching any sports that have returned?
Yeah, I've been watching a lot of PGA stuff. I work some part-time hours out at the golf course just to kill a bit of time here during COVID, and they've always got it on the TV. So I've been watching it a little more intently than I normally would have, probably because, usually I was the type of guy to maybe watch the final round of, tournaments and stuff on a Sunday afternoon. But now that there's really no other sports, it's kind of the only thing worth following. So, yesterday I was watching a little bit of the Memorial, and probably watched a little bit of the final round tomorrow as well. But other than that, I'm not a big soccer guy. I've watched a little bit of NASCAR, but it'll certainly be nice when sports get going again.
How has your perception on the coronavirus changed since it first really came a thing in March?
Well, I think unlike most people, probably in your area, because you're based where? Southern Ontario?
Yeah, I'm based in the GTA, Burlington, Ontario.
Burlington. I knew a fella from Burlington. I think he works at the radio station down there anyway. We always used to bug him about it being the home of the coat factory, although I'm sure you've heard that joke over and over again. But anyway, comparatively to where you are, the COVID situation hasn't really hit Manitoba to the certain level it has in other provinces. I think because of our remoteness and the fact that we only have, 2 or 3 major cities and they're all very, very spread out, it's kept things pretty nicely controlled and contained. I feel like Manitobans have done a really good job of just, being smart. Nobody's gotten carried away, but, people are being smarter, washing your hands more, and restaurants are installing foot openers on doors, so you use your shoes to open restaurant doors, bathroom doors, and things. Yeah, really smart, actually. I can't believe I didn't think of that before. But no, I think it's not. I've tried not to watch the news as much because it seems so dark and gloomy when they talk about what's going on in the U.S. or even in the Toronto area, Quebec, that sort of thing. So we're pretty lucky where we are here that, for example, this weekend, there's 8 or 10 of us up here at a cabin, sitting around a bonfire out in the boat fishing, and, we don't really have to worry about it as much. We're still, taking precautions and not getting carried away, but, it's different here than it is anywhere else.
So have most of the things started to reopen? Have you been able to experience some sort of a normal life?
Yeah, I would say it has. In our little town, I live about 40 minutes outside of Branden, where the Wheat Kings are call their home. And so, my town's probably, I don't know, maybe 3,000 people, maybe if that. And all the stores are back open again. And, the post office is, probably the one place where you see it the most. They've got 2 doors, one where you can go in and get your mail, and the other one where you have to wait in line outside to pick up, say, your Amazon parcel or something you've ordered online. So sometimes when you drive down the street, if it's kind of on an Amazon delivery day, there'll be 5 or 10 people lined up on the sidewalk outside because they don't allow everybody in. But
right, yeah.
Other than that, like, grocery stores are kind of back to normal. But of course, everybody's got the hand sanitizers and the towels and everything at the doors, and people are just a little bit smarter. But from where we are, restaurants are open almost to full capacity, if not 3/4. Sports facilities are opening back up. Rinks are opening back up. There's some hockey schools taking place. Some AAA summer hockey tournaments are starting to get underway. I know minor baseball is going, senior baseball is going. So, it's still a little strange at times when you go down to the ball diamond and they moved all the bleachers, hoping that people don't sit together, and that sort of thing. But, other than that, it's slowly starting to come back to life.
Do you think players in the WHL would have some sort of advantage over players, let's say, in the QMJHL and QMJHL and OHL? Because you mentioned that, rinks are starting to open back up. So, someone on the Branden Wheat Kings, like a Ridly Grieg, might take advantage of that.
Yeah, maybe. I don't really know I don't really know how that all is going to play out because, from a travel perspective, the Ontario Hockey League is very condensed. It's all in one area, and there's very little travel outside. I mean, what do you got? You got Saginaw, Flint, and is there any other American teams? Who am I missing? Saginaw, Flint.
And Erie.
Oh, yeah, Erie Otters, correct. So you've got 3 teams in the U.S., which, is probably the biggest issue the Western League's facing right now with 5 teams in the U.S. So, I think, for example, the players born in Manitoba that are currently living in Manitoba and Saskatchewan even, and Alberta to a certain extent, maybe not as much BC. They're still kind of slower going in the reopening. But I know there's guys, for example, defenseman Chad Nychuk, he is skating in Verdun this week. That's my hometown. The rink's open, and Patty Hole is former Olympic skating coach. She runs a hockey school and skating school for a bunch of junior guys, and they're on the ice already. So there might be some individualized players that are going to get a bit of an edge because of where they live and being in Manitoba and Saskatchewan, as opposed to guys that are in the GTA or, in Quebec or bigger centers. But as for a team advantage, probably not, because I don't think the Western Hockey League is going to let teams get together anytime soon. But you're probably right that some of these guys in the West are going to be on the ice and working out sooner than some of the guys in Ontario.
Now, we did talk about this a bit off camera, but you do some service with the fire department in your area. A huge kudos to you. A lot of respect is earned because you have been working during this coronavirus pandemic. I must ask, how busy are you during the season with your play-by-play, and then your off season must be completely, busy as well.
Well, it's I mean, it's an interesting balance. It's something I started about 5 years ago when I was in Melfort, Saskatchewan, which is it was the junior A stop for me. Home of it's where Willie Mitchell played as junior, and Ruslan Fedotenko, former Pittsburgh Penguins Stanley Cup champion. Those guys played there, and I'd spent 5 years up there working, and the team always had a great relationship with the fire department, whether it be training or certain kind of team building type days, as sometimes you see pro teams doing that sort of thing. And I kind of got interested in it a little bit, and they talked me into jumping on as kind of a volunteer recruit, and I kind of took that a little further and got involved there. And then when I moved back to Manitoba, I just wanted to keep going. So I've really expanded on my resume from an emergency services perspective. Just finished my level 1 certification, which is like North America's kind of standard for firefighters. So all across Canada and the US, been taking some other courses. So we do a great job of training our guys, doing specialized things, whether it be vehicle extrication for car accidents, to farm accident rescue, to all sorts of water and ice rescue and that sort of thing. We're located on a pretty busy highway with a couple bodies of water around, so you never know what you're going to run into. And a bunch of us ended up getting our emergency medical responder certification as well, so we can basically do advanced medical care as well if needed. So it's kind of a fun, I don't want to call it a hobby because it's maybe a little more than that, but it can be busy. I know that the summer for me, I commit a lot more of my time to it than I can in the winter, being away so much. But I work whenever I can and get there whenever I can, and certainly try not to miss any of the special training events and that sort of thing. But it is odd. It has happened a couple of times where my phone, we have an app which basically dispatches you to an emergency. It's gone off a couple times while I'm doing play-by-play. And it's kind of hard and distracting to keep doing the game and try and shut off your phone, and then the alarm going off, and then you're curious as to what's going on and which guys are working and that sort of thing. So you kind of get distracted a little bit, but it's fun. I don't know how much longer I can do both. It's a tough balancing act, but so far it's been pretty fun.
How do you make sure that the alert doesn't affect the play-by-play?
Well, that's only happened a couple of times. I try and now before I never muted any of the notifications because I wanted them on loud, in case my phone was somewhere I had to hear it. But then I realized, after the first time it happened in the rink, that my phone was sitting on the desk in the play-by-play booth. People could hear the alarms going off and that sort of thing. So I've been a lot more cognitive of making sure that my phone is either in my coat pocket and turned to silent or kind of off somewhere. Or they have added a feature to the app now where if you're away for a certain period of time, whether it be on a family holiday or you're working another job or doing whatever, you can set your status as away.
Oh, that's
and then
good.
You don't get those notifications. So thankfully, when the app updated, that's given me a little bit of comfort. And if I just flip that to I'm away, it doesn't happen. So it only happened a couple of times, and both times, luckily, it wasn't really noticed by anybody in the public. So,
was there someone who influenced you to start getting it, for you to get into sports journalism?
Oh boy, probably. It's not really anybody in specific. I know that growing up where I did, we were right on the U.S. border, and I had a little old kind of AM/FM radio, and I could pick up all sorts of U.S. Sports stations, especially ESPN 710 in Bismarck, North Dakota. So they carried all the Minnesota Twins, Vikings, and Wild games. So at night, if I could get the antenna set right, I could listen to whatever sport happened to be on that night. Even the Timberwolves had some radio play-by-play on there, and that kind of piqued my interest at a young age. And then listening to Jerry Howarth do some Blue Jays games on that same little AM/FM radio, I kind of thought, well, this is kind of fun. This is neat. I could do this. And I realized at an early age I wasn't good enough to play the sports at a high level. So I thought, hey, this might be my next path to get there. So,
what university did you attend?
I went to a smaller broadcasting school in Brandon, actually, called the Assiniboine Community College. It's not there. Well, this college is there, but the program isn't there anymore. They kind of tweaked it and changed it when some new educators came in and some new funding and that sort of thing. But anyway, there was a whole crew of us that ended up getting a ton of great media jobs out of that course, including a number of morning show guys, a bunch of TV guys. It was a really good program that churned out a ton of talent. So I was lucky to get in one of the last classes before they changed it to more of a interactive media type thing. But it was 2 years real quick, and I got a job right out of it. So
how did you get your foot into the sports industry? Because, with me, I'm doing this podcast. So how did you get your foot into the door?
Well, actually, when I was in college, I had saw an ad in the local paper. They were looking for college and university students to join the game day staff of the Wheat Kings. And so I called in. I thought, well, this would be neat. What do I got to do? And they were looking for staff to say, shoot the T-shirt cannon and, give out prizes and, skate on the ice with these shovels, that kind of staff that you see at games. And you only worked a couple nights a week, and they paid you $30 cash or whatever. And I ended up getting hired, and I did that for 2 years. And the second year I was there was the year that Branden hosted the Memorial Cup. So I was lucky in that sense that I got to meet a few people in the league and kind of rub elbows with a few people in the organization early to get me started. And then my first job was in Saskatchewan, where I met a couple more good people, and it ultimately led to doing some university football and then into hockey. And then ultimately when the job opened up back in Branden, I already had a connection with the team from previous employment, and it was pretty easy transition. So it's less about what and a lot more about who you know. And that's something I've had to learn over the years.
How did that prior experience that you just mentioned help you set up for where you are today?
Well, you learn early that how many people it takes to run a hockey game. I mean, for any Joe Schmo that just buys a ticket and sits down, you watch your game, you eat your popcorn, you go home. You don't really think about what all goes into it. But when you're on the game day staff, you realize how much goes into it, how many people are involved. On the hockey side, you got the equipment guys, the trainers, the building side, you got the Zamboni guys, the ice guys, the guys cleaning the building. You got everything. You got the fan services people. You realize early on that there's everybody has to be pulling the rope in the right direction to make a junior hockey game go well. And I think that was the biggest thing, was you learn all the little jobs, you learn how to do them, and you kind of learn that everybody's got to be on the right side of it. And that's kind of something that I've carried forward to even now. I may be the radio guy, but I'm not afraid to unpack the bus or help the equipment guys pack sticks or do whatever, because everybody's all pulling for the same cause.
What were some of the bumps in the road that you encountered, and how did you overcome those bumps?
Well, I think early on you get a lot of, and you'll find this as you kind of get into the industry a little bit, is that not everyone's going to like you. Not everyone's going to like how you sound or what you say or how you do it or your style. And you got to learn quickly to let that roll off your back. You can't let it get to you, or it'll really bother you and could get into your head on game day or during a newscast or sportscast or whatever it is you're doing. So for me, it was early on getting some flack about my style or how I said stuff, and that was probably the biggest thing. And just talking to older guys, don't be afraid to reach out to older guys that have been doing it for a long time and ask them their thoughts. They're usually willing to help. And I had a lot of good mentors. Rod Peterson, the voice of the Riders, for the longest time, and a bunch of guys in the league around the Western Hockey League have been really good at kind of guiding us young guys on. And I'll be going into my 5th season, and in the last 4 years, I can't count it on my hands and toes how many times I've reached out to guys and said, "Hey, this is bothering me. What should I do here?" And it's kind of a neat little club once you get in. You got I consider I got 22 other broadcasters that are good friends, and we stay in touch in a big group chat. So it's pretty good that way when it comes to overcoming hurdles and things.
And I think that it comes when, and I think like you mentioned, with everyone not liking your style, it kind of starts out like that, and then people, when they start tuning in more, they kind of get used to it.
Especially if you're replacing somebody that, if you're coming in like I was to Branden, replacing a guy who'd been doing it for over 20 years. All right. They get used to one voice. So when you come in and you don't sound the same or you do things differently, people don't like that. So it's a big adjustment, but you just got to put your head down and keep going, right?
Because as we speak, the Carolina Hurricanes broadcaster, John Forsland, who's been with the team for almost 3 decades, still hasn't got his contract renewed. So there will be some flack with the new guy that may come in to replace him.
Yeah, and that one really kind of gets my blood boiling a little bit because, if you look at his body of work, the fans love him. And just look at what he's saying on social media. If you type his name in social media right now on Twitter, the Hurricanes fans and just hockey fans in general, you don't even have to be a Hurricanes fan. People that were fans of the Hartford Whalers, and other NHL on NBC and other things he's done. I think it's strange that, coming in as the new owner, the new ownership group in Carolina, they made some cuts. They cut some positions. They went away from radio. They made their longtime radio guy retire, basically, and John Forsland was doing TV and radio in a simulcast. And now they're looking to go a different direction. It's tough, but, I get it. It's business and things happen. But it's one of those guys where, let's say they get rid of John because he's making too much money, and they bring in a young guy right at a junior or the East Coast League or the American League because he'll do the job for cheaper. Well, he's going to have some big shoes to fill. And I certainly, as much as I'd like to be that guy, in the same breath, I wouldn't want to be, because you're going to have a long time before you can crack that fan base and get them to forget about John Forsland.
Yeah, John Forsland is probably one of the, if not the most recognizable voice in the NHL, because every time you tune in to a Tuesday night or Wednesday night Carolina Hurricanes game, John is always the one calling the game.
Yeah, for sure. Whoever fills in that role, if in fact they don't renew him, part of me thinks that social media is going to save his job here a little bit. We've seen it before with some other things where, for example, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, the TV show, was not renewed at the time by the original. I think it was Fox had them originally.
And then NBC renewed it, right?
Was not renewed, and people on social media went absolutely bananas. And NBC picked it up and ran with it, and it's one of their biggest hit comedies. So, what I would expect, if John Forsland doesn't get renewed, there'll be another team somewhere that grabs him and puts him to work, because that's too much talent to be wasted.
Growing up in Winnipeg, like you did, what team did you cheer for? Because at the time, the Jets weren't around.
Well, I kind of moved around a little bit. I was born in Winnipeg and lived there for a little bit, but then moved southwest and into the kind of southwest corner. The Jets were there for the first kind of 6 years of my life or whatever. I was probably six when they left or so. But it's not very old, but I still have an original Jets jersey and some old original Jets merchandise. I'd gone to a few games with my parents in the original saga. I was actually at the second last game ever that they played before they moved to Phoenix. I don't remember it. I don't remember really anything about it. But actually, ironically enough, that final year that they had played in '96, I believe it was, my minor hockey team in Neepawa, a small town outside of Winnipeg, we got selected to play at the intermission game, like the Timbits hockey that you see. So I was technically on the ice in the NHL when I was 5 years old, skating around. I don't remember it, but anyway, my parents tell me that's what happened. But I was a Jets fan until they left. And then after that, kind of the Mighty Ducks movies were really big. If you remember those, I'm sure you do.
Classic movies.
So I kind of leaned a little bit towards the Ducks a bit for a while. And then the town I was living in at the time, Shane Knighty was from there. He's now did the TV for Winnipeg, and now he does TV for Vegas. He was from there and ended up making the Ottawa Senators and played there for a number of years. So kind of everybody from town was pulling for Ottawa because of him. And so I cheered for a few teams. Even right now, I guess I'm a Winnipeg Jets fan, but I like cheering for Vegas. I've cheered for different teams. I cheer for players, not teams. Is the way I like to describe it, because people have seen me, go into Jets games where they're playing Toronto and I've got my Jets gear on, and then Winnipeg will be playing Vegas and I've got some Vegas gear on, and people are always asking, well, who do you cheer for? I said, I don't know, whatever I feel like. So I just like good, entertaining hockey, and I cheer for players as opposed to teams.
You mentioned the Mighty Ducks films came out when you were growing up. Would you say those series of films are your favorite hockey film?
Ooh, that's a tough one. They're definitely up there. Miracle is another good one. Slapshot, another good one. But yeah, I if I had to, rank them, definitely D2 was my favorite. The second one, first one was funny. The third one was just odd with the whole Eden Hall Academy thing. But the second one with the Junior Goodwill Games, that was the best one by far.
And I think D2 was kind of like the perfect movie. Like, I don't think the third one really, I think the third one was kind of forced,
Yeah, they could have ended it after they won the Junior Goodwill Games and everyone would have been happy. But no, I would agree. Those are definitely in the top 5 for sure.
Did you ever think of yourself in the broadcasting role, or did you see yourself somewhere else, like in a coaching role?
No, I knew I was the kid where when we were playing street hockey, I was the one sitting on the side in the lawn chair announcing the street hockey games. So I've known from a long time, like, my mom, she tells me that, I used to sit on the stairs at home while the Jets were on and, the original Jets, and I'd be sitting there yelling Teemu Solani's name over and over again. And she kind of thought, he kind of is like the little radio guy up in the press box trying to baby talk my way through some play-by-play. So I was kind of set to do it for a long time.
Did you pick up a copy of Teemu Solani's book?
I did. My mom actually waited in line at a book signing to pick up a copy for me. She got it signed and everything. And it was my Christmas present this year. But unfortunately, I couldn't read it because my dad quickly took it out of my stocking and took it on my parents' winter place in Mexico. So I never did get to read it. I'm sure he brought it back, but I haven't seen it since I opened it in my Christmas present. So hopefully at some point I can read it. But as far as I know, it's probably in the bottom of my parents' suitcase somewhere.
Would you be able to take me through your game day routine?
Sure. Unlike most guys, I'm pretty lucky in the fact that I'm not necessarily an employee of the team, and I'm not necessarily an employee of the radio station. I'm technically an independent contractor. I mean, I've got workspaces, both at the radio station, at the rink, where I can work and get the job done. But I don't really have set hours. I don't have to be somewhere 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, or anything like that. It's kind of free to, as long as I can get my job done and do what's required of me, it's kind of work whenever. So during the week, the Western Hockey League changed to mostly weekend games, very few weekday games. Okay. So during the week, the team practices at 1:00. So I'll drive in and watch practice, visit with the players after and coaches, see what's going on, get a feel for who's in, who's out, what the week's shaping up to be. So I'll do that kind of Monday through Thursday. Thursday, myself and my broadcast partners, we do a weekend preview video for social media and for the team's website. So we usually shoot that during practice. We talk about upcoming opponents, upcoming promotions, broadcast schedule, what's going on, just to look at practice this past week, who's hurt, who's practicing, who's here, who's not, that sort of thing. So shoot that on Thursday. And then for a Friday game, I probably won't come into the rink till about, I guess I'll start at home. So I'll sleep in a little bit, maybe around 9:00. I get up and I wish I could show you, but I don't have a good enough Wi-Fi to show you video, but I've got basically a big scorebook that I get made up every year. It's got basically an outline of the game itself on the right-hand side and a bunch of prep work on the left-hand side, and I just fill it out for every game. So I get up on game day, I'll sit at the kitchen table and at home, and I'll go through that, fill out my book, fill out my lineup card, print it. I built a template on Microsoft Excel for every opponent we have. So there's a tab for each team. So, for example, if we're playing Winnipeg on a Friday night, I'll open up the Winnipeg tab. I'll just go through it, update. Let's say they've made a trade and this player's not here anymore, or they've called someone up, or this guy's hurt. I'll make the little notes in there, and then I'll print it off in my printer and make sure I've got it. Then I usually try and sneak in a little game day nap, usually from about noon to 1:30. That way I know I'm sharp for game time. Shower, get my suit on, and then head out the door. It's about a 40-minute drive to the rink for me. I usually try to get to the rink about 3:30-ish. If I have to set anything up, let's say we've been on the road I'll set up my gear, which doesn't take long. If we've been at home, my gear's already set up. I just kind of take time to kind of get the booth the way I want it. Make sure make sure I got water in the fridge, make sure all the power is working, everything's all connected, internet, that sort of thing. And then I'll head down to the coach's office. We have got an agreement with our coaching staff that, their doors open from 4:15 to 4:45. So I can usually go in there and interview them, visit with them, chat, see what's going on. I try and grab an interview from one of them. And then I head down the hall to the visiting dressing room. Usually they're arriving about 5. I'll visit with their coach, get a quick interview. And then after that, I go up, I import those interviews into my computer, do any editing I need. Then I go down and eat in the media room, scouts room. They've usually got food for, wherever you are. Most buildings have nice catered meals, have a little bite to eat. And then my color guy and my broadcast analyst, they show up. We usually sit, go through some notes, who's got, what stories they're telling, what our broadcast is going to look like. And then usually by then it's close to game time. I'll just go sit up in my perch, talk to my producer, and then it's usually game time. So it all happens so quick. Game ends. And then when the game ends and our post-game show is complete, I usually write a post-game story in the rink, and I'll post it wherever it needs to be posted, whether it's the team website or wherever. And then I do up a couple of audio reports for the radio station, and then head home. I'm usually home by midnight or 1 o'clock on a home game. So that's kind of a look at my day. It's not as extensive as some guys. Some guys, have a lot more to do. I am in charge of the entire media kit and stats package for the broadcasters and coaches, but I usually do that the week of leading up to the game. So that's a big spreadsheet that gets updated after every game, but I try to have that done well in advance so I'm not screwing around with it on game day.
You mentioned that you also take note of who's in and who's out. That brings me to the question, how do you like the NHL's ruling on the unable to participate?
Well, I mean, from a media perspective, I get it where media guys, TV guys are upset that they can't have the information. I get that. You're just trying to do your job.
Yeah. But
I also get it from the other side too, where, if let's use Toronto and Montreal for an example, NHL teams. If Austin Matthews misses a Friday night game and they say because it's a sore wrist, okay, and they make that public. Well, on Saturday, if he's in the lineup, where do you think every Montreal defender is going to be slashing him? They're going to be slashing him in the wrist because they know that it's already buggered up and they want him out of the game. So, I mean, I understand that perspective too. I mean, I'm not suggesting that, guys try to intentionally hurt each other, but if you know that a guy's got a bummed ankle or, a bummed wrist and one little whack to the wrist might get him out of the game, I mean, who knows? It's hockey, right? Things happen. So I get it from both sides. I mean, the whole COVID thing makes everything that much more complicated, but especially when it's an illness that could affect his wife or his kids or his family, I think the NHL, they don't want that information out there. Even the Austin Matthews stuff, I know Kyle Dubas was pretty upset, the GM of the Leafs, that was public before it should have been. You're seeing in baseball, guys are coming out on their own and saying, hey, look, I had it. This is what I went through. If a player wants to talk about it, then great, but I don't think the media should be fishing for it.
Yeah, and like Steve Simmons, I'm sure you saw on Twitter, just got absolutely ripped apart for what he did, and rightfully so, because I don't think he had the permission from Austin Matthews to report on it.
Well, I would have seen it, but I've been blocked by Steve Simmons for some reason on Twitter. I try not to ever get into any sort of, unless it's for like comedic effect. I try not to get into any, debates on Twitter because it's an internet debate. I mean, there's no winner, there's no loser. You never know the
person's intentions.
Yeah, and tone can be taken out of context.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
I must have said something to him somewhere along the line, but I've been blocked by him, so I just unfollowed him. I can't see his stuff anyway, so. But yeah, every once in a while I get a message from a buddy that says, "Do you see Steve Simmons?" I said, "No," and they'll send me some screenshots. But yeah, I don't know. I get it. Guys are trying to do their job, but I mean, I find that there are a lot of media guys that are out there trying to be the next Bob McKenzie, and when you're in that role, you're going to piss some people off. So yeah, I try not to do that. I try to just keep my, and for example, in Branden, if we've got a guy, if I notice on Monday that, John Smith or whatever example player isn't on the ice for practice, I'll ask the coach, hey, what's wrong with this guy? And he'll say, oh, he's got a bummed ankle, and then I'll ask him, is it public knowledge? Is he walking around on crutches? Because if he's walking around on crutches and people in the rink can see him on crutches, then I can say that it's, an ankle injury or a lower body injury. But if it's something they want to be kept quiet, they tell me, we keep a regular group chat going. Our coaches, trainers, everything, we all are on the same page about what information gets out there and stuff. So, some reporters that just do that to stir the pot, and that's just not my style.
Yeah, you have to be respectful of everyone's space,
Oh, for sure. And who knows? I mean, it's one thing. It also looks, I get it. Like, if a reporter doesn't say, that John Smith has a broken ankle and then he's walking around the rink in crutches, everyone's like, oh, it's a shitty reporter because he didn't tell us that he has a broken leg, but we can all see it. But in the same breath, if you were told by the GM, don't say anything, well, then you're kind of in a tough spot. So it's a fine line. And especially with the COVID stuff, I think the NHL's done a pretty good job. I've got a few good friends that are in the inner circle of the NHL. One of my good buddies runs the communications department for the Nashville Predators. And, I've been talking to him regularly about what they're going through. And, by all accounts, the NHL's done a pretty good job of everything. So I wish them the best of luck. I really hope it works out. But in the same breath, it's all about safety right now. And if it doesn't work, well, I think a lot of people would understand. So we'll see how it all shakes out.
Sorry. Go ahead. You should finish.
No, it's one of those things where I would love to watch 5 games in a day, but if it's going to jeopardize a bunch of people's health, I don't think anyone wants that, right? So
I was just going to say, do you think the WHL would follow the NHL intently and try to use some of the protocols that are in place by the NHL?
I think so. I don't think you can have a hub city. Just from a travel perspective, I don't know if it would work at the Western League level because you don't have the TV deal to pay the bills like the NHL does.
Yeah.
You need to have fans in the building. The commissioner's already told us, in a preseason press conference there a couple weeks ago that you have to have 50% in every building minimum in order for the league to be successful. So you need to have, 4 provinces and 2 states all agree to allow stadiums to be half full. Now, that seems like a bit of a stretch right now on July 17th or 18th, whatever the heck the day is today, which, we're a long way from that. But I know that there's a lot of things, especially in Brandon, of course, our owner and governor is Kelly McCrimmon, the GM of the Vegas Golden Knights. And, we've got a lot of alumni in the NHL currently and players that are involved in camps and stuff. And there's going to be a lot of discussion about what teams can do to protect their players and how to keep, dressing rooms clean and benches clean and keep the fans safe. And I know the NHL has been sharing all this with not only Hockey Canada, but the CHL and then, Canadian College, NCAA, the USHL, all of the feeder leagues, American League, everything like that. The NHL is going to set the bar and other leagues are going to follow. So there's a lot of pressure right now on the NHL, but so far I think they're doing a pretty good job.
What are you able to tell OHL fans or QMJHL fans about a player like Ridly Grieg, who, like me, I don't get to see that often?
Well, I think if there's fans out there that don't know who the Brandon Weekings are, I think whenever they hold this year's NHL draft, which by the sounds of it is going to be in October, you're going to know Braden Schneider and you're going to know Ridly Grieg by the time the NHL draft is over, because both those guys are going to be top 15 picks. Schneider, in my opinion, is a top 10 pick. I know that other, Craig Button, Bob McKenzie had him in the 11, 12, 13 range. I may be a little biased. I see him a lot, but a guy like Ridly Grieg, his dad, is a longtime NHLer, played for the Flyers. He still scouts for the Flyers and their management team, but Ridley's a kid that you don't see very much of. I would compare him to maybe a more skilled Jerome McGinley in a sense that, Iggy loved the rough stuff. He would scrap, he would hit hard, he would grind it out, he would block shots, kill penalties. That's the type of guy Ridly is, but Ridley's got a little more skill. He can shoot the puck like an absolute laser beam. He's got super silky hands, but he loves to mix it up. He was suspended like 4 times this year for maybe some questionable calls. He hits hard, he fights, he likes the rough stuff, and a lot of players hate playing against him because he's got a shit-eating grin on his mouth, on his face all the time. He just has a face that annoys the other team, and it gets under guys' skin. They chase him around, take penalties, and then he scores on the power play. So he's got a good mix of skill and pest, and some team is going to be very lucky to draft him here whenever the NHL draft ends up going.
So going with the characteristics that you just explained with him being such a tough player to play against, my first thing that comes to mind is a Brad Marchand or a Brendan
Yeah.
Gallagher. Do you agree with those comparisons?
I feel like if you could put the two guys together, because I don't think he's quite as hated as Brad Marchand. I think, Marchand definitely has carved out that niche, but he is a pest and he's annoying, kind of like Gallagher. He's certainly not a tough guy by any means, but he has a swagger about him that just drives guys nuts on the ice. And I don't know what it is, but I've seen him. He says things quietly and with a straight face. He's not one of them big, Charles Barkley, Dennis Rodman type trash talkers, but he's the type of guy that'll like sneak up to you on a face-off circle and say something. And by the time you realize what he said, the puck's been dropped, you're mad, and you've already forgotten what you're doing. And he's got the puck and he's good in a scoring position. So, I mean, he's so smart, he's so skilled, and he's such a pest, and he loves the tough stuff. I mean, if I'm the Philadelphia Flyers with a mid-round, middle of the pack pick, knowing that his dad played for you for 10 years and all about the family, he's got a sister that plays Division I in the States and a sister that's playing CIS in Canada. He's an athletic family. That's a steal. You take him, put him in Philadelphia. The fans will already love him. And to me, he's a Philadelphia Flyer, Boston Bruin type player.
Well, I mean, he definitely seems like that, like a Broad Street bully type of guy,
Yeah, and he's a pest. Like, when you think of players that fit in Philadelphia, to me, he's a perfect fit.
Now, how fascinating is it commentating on the same team as a guy or two guys like Brian Schneider who could go in the first round?
It's awesome because a lot of the clips of their stuff, goals, hits, fights, end up on all the highlight reels on TSN or Sportsnet. So I'll be sitting at home and they'll be talking about the draft and I'll hear myself in the background on the TV. So from that perspective, it's kind of cool. But no, every night it's fun. You get to meet a lot of scouts. I know one night, I can't remember where we were. I want to say we were in Seattle and there were 34 NHL scouts at the game. Which is odd because there's only 31 teams, but some teams sent two guys to watch these guys. And you sit down in the media room beforehand, and the scouts come in and eat, and you just see guys that a lot of former players that you used to watch. When I was a kid, guys like Todd Harvey with the Sharks, or Thomas Steen with the Winnipeg Jets, or different guys like that. Mike Keane, who won a cup with Montreal and Dallas. You see those guys, you get to chat with them. What do you think of Ridly? What do you think of Brayden? And then it creates good conversation on the air too, because, if a guy like Mike Keane, who's scouting for Colorado, says, this is what I like about Ridly, and this is what we see in him, I can talk about that on the air, and I can go on and say, I was talking to a scout from Colorado today, and he said, this is what he likes about Ridly. Creates some good stories. So it's fun. I like calling games when those guys are out there, and it certainly makes for interesting conversation pieces on the air.
Now, this year was obviously something that we will never forget in the near future. How did you find out the season was going to be canceled?
Well, the Thursday before, it was March 12th, we had team picture day. No practice. Coaches, we were getting ready for a home game on the Friday night. So the coaches said, we'll have a light skate after the team picture, and then everyone can go home and whatever. We'd heard some rumblings because the night before was the night Rudy Gobert in the NBA had that incident where he had tested positive, and the NBA canceled the game right as it was starting. So we had heard some rumblings a little bit, but nobody was really sure what was going on. And then that night, Thursday night, they had postponed Friday's games, the league had. And so a bunch of us, obviously, I mentioned our group chat amongst the broadcasters earlier. We were talking about, what's this mean? What's happening? What's going to go on? And then it was about Friday morning, sometime the next day, I was told that there's going to be a press conference or a press release that they were going to postpone the rest of the season for a period of time to reassess and see what was happening. And I got the release, read it, filed a couple stories, and did what I had to do from a radio perspective, and then kind of just sat there and wondering what's going to happen. And then just stayed in touch with guys over the next couple of weeks. And then when it ultimately came down that they were canceling the season for good, I was just kind of sitting at home. I mean, when your whole life is getting up and going to the rink every day, sometimes you looking for something to do, right? And when they canceled the season, I'd gone from every day I was preparing for the playoffs, I was building audio, I was building intros, I was redoing my scorebook, I had picked up a new suit. I was getting all pumped up for the playoffs because we were scheduled to play Winnipeg, which was going to be a great rivalry. I was really looking forward to it. And all of a sudden, one day the rug's pulled out from underneath you and you're not playing. So I went, there was a couple of weeks of real unsure what's happening. Is my contract, what's going to happen? Am I going to get laid off like everybody else, or am I going to be able to keep working? And what's the plan? And, after some meetings and some discussions, we decided to stay status quo. I mean, myself and a couple of my broadcast partners, we still do a weekly podcast as well. We've got Wade Redden coming on this week. And, we've been able to pump out some content that way. I know you'll laugh at this, but this week I'm taking the mascot suit out to my farm, and we're going to do a photo shoot of our mascot doing some farm chores.
That is great.
And we're going to use it as a social media post of here's what Willie has been doing since COVID, and make it look, he'll have coveralls on and he'll be feeding the cows and feeding the chickens, and it'll make for some funny online content. But, it's a little different. Your prep work changes a little bit. Now we're talking about next year and how we're going to make that work. But yeah, it's been a little odd, I will admit. Luckily for me, like I said, I live on a farm. We got lots going on, and with the fire department, and with some good buddies working out at the golf course, I go out there and help out every once in a while, and I try to keep myself busy. So it's odd. It's odd timing. It's everything about it's strange, but oh well. What else can you do, right?
That's correct. What is the name of the podcast?
It's called The Weekly Harvest. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts. It's on Apple. It's on Spotify. It's on YouTube. We record live every Monday night, and then it gets posted in podcast form on Tuesdays. We've had some. Obviously, the Wheat Kings have a great alumni, including Ray Ferraro.
Yeah.
Darren Dreger was the radio guy for the Wheat Kings. Darren Millard, he was the radio guy for the Wheat Kings. We've had some great alumni on, and last week. Who was that? Last week we had I can't even remember. Oh, we had Ray Ferraro on. We had Darren Dreger on. We've had Kelly McCrimmon on a bunch of times, and we've gotten about 25, 26 episodes in, and we're just trying to find our way, similar to what you're doing. And we're lucky that we've got a broadcast company that's that owns a radio station that's really taken it and run with it, and they promote it, they market it. We've had a ton of listenership and a ton of downloads, and it's been really fun. So
you mentioned that, Branden was getting ready for the playoffs against the Winnipeg Ice. It would have been a huge rivalry and something definitely WHL fans would have looked forward to. What would be some challenges that Branden would have run into?
Well, Winnipeg was a better team than I think a lot of people expected them to be. I mean, they were fast, they were skilled, and they were greasy. I think it caught a lot of people by surprise, considering that Kootenay, the team that they relocated from, had been so bad for so long. People kind of didn't take them seriously, and they came in, and in their first year they did a great job. I mean, they're playing in a makeshift building right now until there's this being built, and so it's smaller, it's dungy, it's kind of gross, and they took it to their advantage. It's a small building. They played rough, they played tumble, and they gave Branden some trouble. So, I mean, had for example, they played each other so many times. Had the playoff series gone 7 games, they would have played 13 times. They'd have played 17 times that season.
Oh my God!
Because there was 10 in the regular season. There would have been 7 playoff games, and they met twice in the preseason. So technically, it would have been 19 games between the two teams this season had the series been played and gone 7. So there was lots of fights. They didn't like each other. There's 2 sets of brothers. Each team had 2 sets of brothers on opposite teams, so there was some family hatred. There was some rough stuff. It was pretty interesting. So I was really looking forward to it. The fans were packing into the buildings. It was going to be an absolute blast, and it's really, really unfortunate that it happened the way it did.
Do you know why the Winnipeg Ice doesn't just partner with the Jets and use the Bell MTS Center?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. I think from a business perspective, the Jets and the Moose are doing their own thing.
Oh, right. Yeah, I forgot about the Moose.
I feel like they didn't want the competition. I think they'd explored it once or twice before, similar to the way Edmonton and Calgary have partnerships, with the Flames and the Oilers and the Hitmen and the Oil Kings. But it never really came to fruition. And the owners of the Ice, I don't know if they, I think they wanted to just do it on their own. It would have made sense, but to be in that building, but in the same breath, I don't think it would have, because you'd have been competing, because the Moose and the Ice, same price point, different type of hockey, right? I mean, for $15, you can go to a Western Hockey League game and watch teenagers, or you can go to watch an American League game in a nice rink with pro players. So they're kind of competing against one another a little bit for that market. I mean, obviously it's a Jets town first and foremost. Everyone's going to the Jets first, but it's between the Moose and the Ice for the other half of the hockey fan market. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I mean, they seem to get along fine. They've got a decent partnership, but they don't really get along in the same breath, if you know what I'm saying. They're friends, but they're kind of like neighbors that are constantly competing to see whose lawn looks nicer. It would be the best way to put it. They're friendly to each other, but they don't really like each other.
Is there a certain barn in the WHO that gives you chills from the fans every time you do play-by-play?
Prince Albert or Seattle. Prince Albert is an old, tiny rink. It's one of the oldest rinks in the league, and the fans are bananas. Like, I can't even begin to explain to you the fans in PA. The building is so small that, the press box where I'm calling games, I can reach out basically and touch the glass on the penalty box. Like, I'm right above the penalty box. So my ice mics and my ambient mics pick up everything, every single cuss word that gets thrown out by the fans. And they're crazy. They love the Raiders. It's a small building. They pack 3,000 in there, 2,500, whatever it is. And it is nuts from opening puck drop till the end of the night. And it's so much fun in there. They won the league last year in those playoff games. You couldn't squeeze another person in there if you tried. And Seattle's the same way. It's obviously a much nicer building, but we played there last year on Tuesday night, which was a student night. And they've got a couple of universities around there. And it was packed with students. It's like $2 beers, $2 hot dogs. Everyone's hammered drunk, and they're just screaming all night, and they just yell at you, and it's so much fun. So Seattle or PA definitely are two of my favorite places to go.
Now, how weird would it be for you to commentate off a monitor next year? Because that seems like it's going in that direction.
Oh boy. I mean, if I have to do it, I will. Do I want to do it? No.
Yeah, I don't think anyone wants to do it.
No, it just doesn't have the same feel. But I mean, whatever, I guess, it's the way it's going. I've been studying up a little bit on the Korean Baseball League, watching them do some play-by-play from their home studios of the baseball, and it just doesn't have the same effect. But I mean, you got to adapt and go with the flow. So we haven't discussed it. We have a meeting lined up here for the middle of August to kind of determine, if we do come back to play October 2nd like they plan, how are we going to go about this? But nobody's throwing that out there yet, because I don't think anyone wants to.
The MLB is pumping in artificial crowd noise. What are your thoughts on that? And could you expect the WHO to go down that route?
I don't know what I think of that, because, in the Western Hockey League, sometimes on a Wednesday night in February when it's minus 40, you've got a half full building anyway. So, and they weren't pumping in crowd noise. So now all of a sudden, if you've got a half full building, because they're only allowed to fill it halfway, and then they start pumping in crowd noise, I don't know. Personally, if they can't have fans in the building at all, the league won't go. You just can't pay the bills.
That's true.
So if you cannot pay the bills, so unless there's fans in the building, you can't play. So I don't think they'll ever need to, because you're not going to see them play with an empty building. I really hope that they never pump artificial audio in, but I can't see it happening, because if there's no fans in the building at all, I don't think they're playing.
Well, we see right now with the CFL, like it's almost week 9 now, and I haven't heard anything on my end. I'm pretty close contact with Matthew Shinetti, as I interviewed him on this podcast before. And I don't think they can play without fans.
I think they're very similar situations. The CHL and the CFL, their markets, you need the ticket revenue. You need people coming through the door and buying popcorn, buying beers. I read somewhere, I think it was in the Regina paper, that the Saskatchewan Roughriders are on pace to lose $30 million this year, because obviously they built a new stadium, no season, no concerts, no anything in their building. I mean, it doesn't sound promising. I'd hate to see it, cripple a league moving forward. But I think that there's going to be some serious struggles here from some teams across the CHL and the CFL and other sports leagues too. But it's just a strange time. I mean, nobody really knows what's going on. And I mean, luckily we were slowly getting some sports back, but from a junior perspective, like, for me, it's my job on the line. So I hope it works, but at the end of the day, I really don't know. I don't know the answers. There's higher paid people than me that are making the decisions. I'm just going to go along with it.
Now, you're no businessman, but how do you expect these leagues to potentially come back from this catastrophe?
Oh, I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, like I said, there are smarter people than me out there that, are getting paid big bucks to figure this out. But I mean, I look at it from any business perspective. I mean, if you look at your neighborhood corner store where you go and pick up pop in a bag of chips, on the way home to watch Netflix. I mean, if they had to close for a year, and then just open back up, I mean, it's difficult. How do you do it, right? How do you pay your bills? How do you keep the lights on? How do you do any of that? So it's no different, a hockey team or a football team, compared to any other business. And right now it's not looking good, but I think Canada's done a pretty good job. So it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out.
Now, you've called playoff games for the Branden Wheat Kings, correct?
Yeah, strangely enough, only a couple of them. My first year, the team was swept by the Medicine Hat Tigers. My second year, they beat the Tigers in 6 and then lost to the Lethbridge Hurricanes in 6. My third year was last year. Last year, and they did not make the playoffs. And then this year, they were scheduled to make the playoffs, and the season gets canceled. So I've called 17 playoff games in 4 years, which seems like a lot, but 4 games my first year, 12 my second year, and it'd be 16 games. Yeah. So 4 my first year, 12 my second year, and then none last year and none this year. So realistically, Brandon's only missed the playoffs 3 times since I've been alive. They've been that consistent. But 2 of those years have been with me as the radio guy. So either I'm really bad luck or I just have some really bad timing.
How special is it during that season to call playoff games?
Playoffs are the best. I mean, the Keystone Center in Brandon, it's one of the coolest buildings in the league. It's old. It's got so much character. The benches are on opposite sides, which you don't see very often. The fans are nuts, especially in the playoff time. You get people in costumes and people bringing drums and musical instruments, and it's just crazy in there. I mean, I remember I wasn't working for the team yet, but I'd come home on a vacation to watch a few of the playoff games against Seattle when they won, and I've never heard that building like that before. I mean, it just rumbled right through your feet, up through your bones. So I was really looking forward to a series against Winnipeg, especially because I know there would have been a lot of visiting fans come in, and it would have been crazy. But whatever. I mean, you got to let it roll the way it does, and hopefully next year, we can move on and get a long playoff run and get back on the championship train.
You've been sharing a lot of stories this podcast, which I appreciate. I love them. But do you have one specific funny story to tell the viewers?
Oh boy. What's Brandon related, or
it could be just about your life? Well, see, I'd rather it be Branden Wheat King related, but it could be, just in your daily life.
Well, how about this? I mean, you talk about bad luck. Okay. So my first, I kind of grew up, in the Brandon area, and it was kind of my lifelong dream to be the radio guy for the Branden Wheat Kings. So when I got the job, I thought it was great. I was going into my first season. I did 4 preseason games on the radio to get prepared, and I thought, okay, I'm good. I'll figure this out. Home opener, my first season, 50th anniversary season, the Branden Wheat Kings, 5,500 people in the building, sold out, huge, beautiful ceremony unveiling the championship from the year before. Banners fall down, alumni are back, ceremonial face-off, beautiful. Well, about halfway through the game, they start stopping the game, and I couldn't figure out why. But from my angle, I couldn't see it, but there was a thick layer of fog hanging over the ice. The humidity from outside, it was like 40-degree day in September, and the humidity was at 100%, and the building's air conditioners couldn't keep up. So there was a thick layer of fog over the ice where the referees couldn't see what was going on, and neither could the players. So they would stop for a while. The Zamboni would come out and drive some laps. The players would skate around. The fog would go away, and then they'd keep playing. Well, they ended up canceling the game in the middle of the game. They just said, nope, we can't play. We're done. So at the time, it was 2-1 for Moose Jaw when they canceled the game. And they couldn't reschedule it until December 9th. So 2 months later, Brandon's playing Moose Jaw, and they have to complete that first game and then play a full game after that, which is just odd. Okay, so that was my first ever game that got canceled halfway through.
Oh my!
After an entire lifetime of me. Yeah. So then my second game, the next night, is in Moose Jaw. We go to Moose Jaw. I start the broadcast, and everything's clipping along perfectly. The hardwired internet drops out, and I had to do my whole second game in the Western Hockey League from my cell phone because my equipment wouldn't connect. So that's my first 2 games of the league, and both were a complete disaster. I finished the season. Not many other goofy stories happened. My second year, 3 members of the team and 1 member of the coaching staff test positive for mumps in a mumps outbreak across the Western Hockey League.
Yes,
and players have to
that.
go into quarantine. Players have to go into quarantine, including myself, because there was no record of me ever having the vaccine when I was a kid. So I had to sit in quarantine for a couple of days. And and then so that happened my second year. Nothing really my third year. And then, of course, the season gets canceled to COVID my fourth year. So I've had some bad luck. I've had some strange things happen, but it's all fun. Hopefully moving forward, I don't have any more goofy stories to tell.
Well, Branden, last question here on the Pagcast. Do you have any advice you'd like to offer for aspiring sports journalists or sports broadcasters?
Don't be afraid to do a little bit of everything. And, I know my first job ever, I was getting paid $600 every 2 weeks to read the weather and the news at a small town radio station in Saskatchewan. And I was about as far away from, sports as I could get. But, I learned a lot, and I was covering some court stuff. I was covering some city council, and, I took it all in stride and, never complained and got my opportunity and took it. So I tell every young guy or girl that's asked what, for a piece of advice, you got to just take every job and do the best you can, even if you don't think it's even remotely close to what you want to do, because someday it may pay off. It's better off to be good at a lot of things than really good at a few things, because, if somebody says, hey, I need somebody that can do this, if you're good at a lot of things, you might be able to just jump in and find yourself in a good spot. So don't be afraid to chip in wherever. And like I said earlier, if you ever, get a job in the hockey world or the baseball or football world, don't be afraid to pick up a bag and help load the bus, because it'll all come back and help you out later on. So.
Well, I'd like to thank the Brandon Wheat Kings play-by-play, Branden Crowe, for joining me on today's podcast. Thank you again, Branden.
Yeah, no problem. Best of luck moving forward, and appreciate this.